Hamas releasing the first 3 Israeli hostages yesterday after the ceasefire deal went into effect. Romy Gonen, Emily Damari, and Doron Steinbrecher all handed over to Israeli Defense Forces after 471 days in captivity. 30 more hostages are expected to be freed over the next 6 weeks, including 2 of the 3 remaining Americans, in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. 4 more hostages should be released next weekend. President Trump telling NBC News that his administration will make sure the ceasefire holds by using, quote, good government. He also warned if they don't respect us and the deal doesn't hold, then, quote, all hell will break out. I want to bring in a Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy, Deputy National Security Advisor under President Trump, and author of The Battle for the Jewish State, How Israel and America Can Win, Victoria Coates. Victoria, so many questions for you, but I think, you know, this really shows that Israel, I think that Netanyahu, and this has been talked about already, you know, this isn't a great deal. It's tough to see Hamas be able to replenish their ranks with all of these prisoners, but you had 3 young girls come home to their mothers yesterday.
No, Cheryl, good to be with you. I think it has to be a day to celebrate, to get these 3 innocents out of Gaza after 470 days. I mean, it's just unspeakable what they've been through. You're correct. It's a tough deal to accept because of the Hamas criminals who are going to be released starting next weekend. But at the same time, as I said, we need to celebrate. And the whole reason this is happening is Israel has confidence in President Trump that if this deal does go south, as he just said in that NBC interview, you know, he's going to have Israel's back. And the United States will stand with Israel doing what it needs to do to defeat Hamas. So I think that's what's changed here.
You know, Victoria, it's interesting because if you look at the breakdown of how these phases are going to go, of course, the concern is that Hamas could renege. They could back out of the deal. Is that a risk in your opinion?
Oh, of course. It always is. I mean, they were 3 hours late on the deal over the weekend. So they're not a good faith actor. They're not, you know, negotiating normally the way we would think of. I mean, those scenes of the girls coming out yesterday, being taunted and surrounded by armed fighters, you know, they are not in any way interested in peace. They're not interested in a negotiated settlement. So all of these sudden calls that, you know, the Palestinians should be given a state as a reward for doing this, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, you know, Israel's going to do what it can to get the remaining hostages out. There are some 90 of them that are in Hamas's control. But important to remember, Cheryl, there are some more hostages that are not in Hamas's control. They're in the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ's control, for example. So we can get, even if this deal comes to fruition, we may not be at the end of the road.
Right. Well, for the first time in U.S. history, Victoria, foreign leaders are going to attend an American presidential inauguration. No heads of state have previously made an official visit to the U.S. for any such event like this. He extended an invite, by the way, to Xi Jinping, who declined, but China's vice president is going to be in attendance today. Argentine President Javier Milei and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni also reportedly are attending. I want to get your reaction to this shift in the traditions of Inauguration Day.
Well, it was interesting because Han Zhen, the vice premier of China, was on my train yesterday down from New York. So that was somewhat unexpected. But it shows you what President Trump wants to do. He wants to have good relations with leaders around the world. It's one of his kind of trademark methods of diplomacy. He creates these personal relationships. He works them. Keeps lines of communication open. And so on the one hand, he's got the invitation out to Chairman Xi. As we just said, the vice premier is going to be at the inauguration today. But he's also threatening very, very high tariffs on China, which could be crippling to them economically. So there's kind of a good cop, bad cop going on here. I think it's great to use the inauguration this way. It's a wonderful spectacle of America because of the weather. It's all going to be inside. but it shows our peaceful transition of power. I can think of no more instructive thing for the Chinese to witness than the actual inauguration of the President of the United States.
Interesting. Well, let's stay with this, because President-elect Trump telling now his advisors he wants to travel to China in his first 100 days in office. That's according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. Trump and Xi also spoke by phone Friday. They discussed trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and other issues. I want to get your thoughts on that, in particular, the timing with regards to TikTok and the Supreme Court upholding the ban on Friday, and then Donald Trump reinstating the app yesterday, at least giving them permission to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for open lines of communication with China. It prevents there being accidents or miscommunications that could potentially lead to conflict. So I think that's good. I mean, if the president wants to make that his first trip this year, that also, is absolutely his right to do that. I think with TikTok, it'll be interesting because you do have a range of views in Congress, for example, which, of course, passed this law banning TikTok. At the Heritage Foundation, we've done a lot of work on what is so pernicious about this algorithm that becomes almost addictive, particularly for young people, the kind of data that's being harvested, the fact that you've got members of the Chinese Communist Party on the board of TikTok. All of this is highly problematic and unusual. I mean, this is not a normal company. But I think, President Trump also knows that a lot of Americans like TikTok. They make money on TikTok. So trying to find some kind of middle ground here, seems logical. But we'll have to see what happens with the Congress.
Yeah, well, of course, the question, does that algorithm that you just mentioned, is it really just a vehicle for the CCP to collect the data, the private data of Americans, in particular kids? Victoria Coates, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.